It's 10,000 BC. You're exhausted. You've been walking since dawn, carrying more than you should, and your feet are doing something you'd rather not think about. You drop down near a cluster of flat rocks, reach into a clay pot you've been hauling for 3 days, scoop out some of the thick, slightly fizzy, oddly pleasant liquid inside, and you drink. And something shifts. The exhaustion softens. The pain in your feet becomes a distant concern. The guy who's been annoying you all week suddenly seems a little more tolerable. You don't know why. You just know you want more of it. That was probably your ancestors' first conscious experience of alcohol. And the story of how that moment came to exist is one of the most bizarre, surprisingly deep, genuinely world-altering rabbit holes in all of human history. Because here's what nobody tells you. Alcohol didn't start with grapes. It didn't start with grains. It didn't start with a winemaker in ancient Mesopotamia with a clay tablet and a business plan. The relationship between humans and alcohol is far older, far stranger, and far more biologically fundamental than any of that. And once you understand it, you'll never look at a beer the same way again. Let's start with the obvious assumption and immediately dismantle it. Most people, if you ask them when humans first started drinking alcohol, would say something like ancient Egypt or ancient Rome, maybe ancient China. Somewhere with civilization, with agriculture, with people who had enough surplus grain to start fermenting things on purpose. That's the story we were all vaguely taught, and it makes intuitive sense. You need civilization to have wine, right? Wrong. Completely, fascinatingly wrong. The actual story begins not with humans at all. It begins with fruit. Ripe fruit ferments. This is not a human invention. This is chemistry. When a fruit falls from a tree and sits in the heat long enough, the naturally occurring yeasts on its skin begin converting the sugars inside into ethanol. The fruit becomes mildly alcoholic, entirely on its own, with no help from anyone, no recipe required. And animals have been eating this fermented fruit for millions of years. Birds have been observed flying erratically after eating fermented berries. Elephants in parts of Africa seek out the fallen fruit of the marula tree, which ferments on the ground, and they return to the same spots repeatedly and predictably. Vervet monkeys in the Caribbean, descendants of animals brought there centuries ago, were studied and found to have roughly the same distribution of alcohol preference as humans. Some drink heavily. Most drink moderately. A few avoid it entirely. One population, introduced to alcohol for the first time, immediately sorted itself into the same behavioral patterns humans display. This is not coincidence. This is deep biology. Here's the part that should genuinely stop you. Humans, along with all other great apes and several other primates, carry a specific genetic mutation in an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase 4, ADH4 for short. This enzyme breaks down ethanol in the body. The mutated version is roughly 40 times more efficient at processing alcohol than the version carried by most other mammals. Researchers traced this mutation back using genetic analysis and found it appeared approximately 10 million years ago, not 10,000 years ago, not 100,000 years ago, 10 million years ago, in a common ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas. What was happening 10 million years ago? The climate in Africa was shifting. Forests were shrinking. Our distant ancestors were spending more time on the ground, eating fallen fruit, including fruit that had been fermenting in the heat. The individuals who could metabolize that ethanol efficiently without being incapacitated had an advantage. They could access a calorie-dense food source that other animals were leaving alone. Natural selection didn't give us the ability to drink alcohol because we invented fermentation. We invented fermentation because we already had the biology for alcohol, built by 10 million years of eating the forest floor. So when did intentional fermentation start? The oldest direct chemical evidence of deliberately produced alcohol comes from a site in China called Jiahu, dating to approximately 7000 BC. Researchers analyzed residue from ancient clay pottery and found traces of a fermented beverage made from rice, honey, hawthorn fruit, and wild grapes. A mixed fermented drink, already complex, already refined, already combining multiple ingredients. That's not a first attempt. That's the product of considerable prior experience. The oldest known dedicated winery, a facility specifically built for wine production, was discovered in Armenia and dates to around 4000 BC. It had a press, fermentation vats, storage jars, and drinking cups, a complete operation, an industry. But here's the question, underneath the question. Both of these finds represent what survived thousands of years underground. Pottery survives. Fermented liquid in an open container does not. What happened before pottery was widespread? What happened in the hundreds of thousands of years of human existence before people were making clay vessels? The honest answer is that we almost certainly don't know the full picture. But the behavioral evidence from our closest relatives, the genetic evidence in our own enzymes, and the anthropological evidence from every documented human culture on Earth all point in the same direction. The desire to seek fermented substances is not a cultural habit. It's a biological inheritance older than our species. What did alcohol actually do for ancient communities? This is where the story gets genuinely important, and where the modern assumption about alcohol as purely recreational falls completely apart. Fermented beverages in the ancient world were medicine. They were water safety. Water in most ancient settlements near populations of people and animals was genuinely dangerous, full of pathogens that could and regularly did kill. Fermented drinks, through the fermentation process itself, were significantly safer to consume than untreated water. Beer kept people alive. This is not a romantic metaphor. It is a documented historical fact. Alcohol was currency. In ancient Egypt, workers building the pyramids were paid partly in beer, not as a perk, as wages. It was caloric, it was safe to drink, and it was universally valued. Labor was literally priced in fermented grain. Alcohol was social technology. Research into ancient and modern human communities consistently shows that shared consumption of alcohol synchronizes social bonding in measurable neurological ways. It raises oxytocin levels. It lowers social anxiety. It encourages the kind of extended, relaxed, trust-building conversation that holds communities together. Every drinking ritual in every ancient culture, the Greek symposium, the Norse mead hall, the shared chicha of Andean communities, served the same function underneath its cultural surface. It built the group cohesion that kept people alive in a world that constantly threatened to tear groups apart. Alcohol was ritual. In virtually every religious tradition with ancient roots, from Dionysian rites in Greece to the Vedic Soma ceremonies of ancient India to the sacred pulque of Aztec culture, fermented drinks occupied a central sacred role. They were considered portals, ways of bridging the ordinary world and the divine. The altered state was not a side effect to be managed. It was the point, the mechanism of contact. And then came the part that changed everything. Around 10,000 years ago, at roughly the same time humans began settling and farming, something shifted in the relationship between alcohol and civilization. Some archaeologists now argue it shifted civilization itself. The Göbekli Tepe site in modern Turkey, built approximately 11,500 years ago, is the oldest known monumental architecture in the world. People coordinated to build massive stone structures centuries before they were farming in the conventional sense. Researchers found enormous stone vessels at the site that appear to have held fermented grain beverages in quantities that could serve large gatherings. The argument, made seriously by researchers including Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania, is that fermentation may have been one of the primary motivations for grain domestication. Humans didn't farm grain to make bread, and then discover they could also make beer. They may have farmed grain specifically to ensure a reliable supply of something they already knew how to make and desperately wanted more of. Bread may be the byproduct. Beer may have been the original goal. If that's true, then the foundation of civilization, the settled agricultural life that produced writing, architecture, cities, laws, and everything that followed, may have been built partly on the desire to keep the fermentation going at scale. History is sometimes beautiful in the most absurd ways. So when did ancient humans first get drunk? The honest answer is, at least 10 million years ago, accidentally eating fruit off the forest floor, with biology that had already been optimized for exactly that experience. And the decision to make it intentional. to build fires and press grapes and seal clay jars and store grain through winter to ensure the supply never ran out. That decision may be one of the oldest and most consequential choices our species ever made. Every glass of wine, every poured beer, every toast at a celebration traces back not to a winery or a brewery, but to a primate in a shrinking forest, finding a fallen piece of fruit, tasting something unexpected, and deciding that whatever this was, it was worth paying attention to. You've been paying attention to it ever since. All of you have. For 10 million years. And what about you? Do you think civilization would exist without alcohol? Let me know in the comments. Until then, I'll see you soon.